we haven't been taught about how whiteness was created, how our policies and systems and structures have really, created a society where we are like forced to be separate from one another. We're forced to dehumanize certain human beings and feel disconnected from one another. So this is about the consciousness raising portion. And then to connect them with each other in a network, what I call the beloved community, so we can then um, collaborate with each other to begin to make those shifts.
I am so excited to be with you all today. Welcome to the Success Sessions. My name is Jessie Johnson, and I am honored so often to have the opportunity to ask my beloved mentors and teachers to discuss their relationship to success. This is a deep and rich topic and really touches everything. It's an entry point into such depth. I am constantly inspired in these conversations and really hope you are too. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Anu Gupta, my dear friend and anti-bias expert. Anu teaches people like you and me and anybody else who's interested in breaking bias day by day, moment by moment. And I learned so much from him consistently. Anu is a scientist, educator, lawyer, and the founder of Be More with Anu. He has logged over 10,000 hours of meditation and developed Be More with Anu's science-backed, compassion-based approach after conducting decade-long research on the causes of and solutions to racial and gender inequality. He's got a freaking brilliant brain. Having trained over 16,000, now over 20,000 people, Anu has spoken about his work on the TED stage, South by Southwest, and the 10% Happier podcast. He's got a law degree from NYU Law School, where he was a Root Tilden Kern Scholar. He's got a master's in philosophy in human development from Cambridge and a BA in international relations and Islamic studies. And in this interview, he talks all about that and more. The man is brilliant, so deep-hearted, and so insightful. He is kind and unapologetic at the same time, and speaks with compassion and curiosity about some really tender topics. I cry in this interview, which is a big deal. Don't always do that. And Anu breaks down all kinds of barriers. So I really encourage you to listen in, follow him on Instagram at Be More with Anu, ANU, and learn from this man and his expertise. Welcome. Let's dive in. Hey, y'all. I'm so excited to be with you today in the Success Sessions, speaking to my beloved friend, Anu Gupta, expert in all things bias, specifically around dismantling it. I have learned, Anu, so much from you in the last, I guess it's been like almost 2 years that we've been friends. And I feel like I would be so much less resourced without you in my life. So I just want to start there. Like, I'm so grateful for you and the work that you have done to get yourself here and the work that you're doing now, because it's changed my life already. And there's more.
That's beautiful to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I will accept.
Yeah, you deserve it. I want to start here by asking you about your personal relationship to success and how you defined success as a child, perhaps in ways that were misguided or like actually completely incorrect. What did you used to think success meant?
Oh my gosh, Jesse, this is such a wonderful question, because this is something that I've been grappling with over the last 6 months, particularly with COVID and quarantine and, having to rebuild my business as a result of that. And then, of course, the racial reckoning that all of us have been experiencing since the murder of George Floyd. Such a beautiful question. So I think as a child, success for me was really I actually didn't think about success as a child because I was a child, right? So I was just playful. But I
Hmm.
think as I grew older, particularly moving into my teenage years, I think because of the family I came from and the surroundings I was in, I think success really meant having a profession. So it definitely meant not just a college degree, but a graduate degree. Um, Ideally in medicine, because that's what my parents were. So having
Hmm.
that title, which came with a status, and then money, like a certain amount of money, a certain amount of wealth to be comfortable. So those three things really defined what success was. And I think implicit in that was if you have those things, you are more desirable, you are more respected, and you're taken seriously by people around you. So it wasn't like there was no, I don't think there was a malintent in having such metrics for success. But that's something that I was doing for a very long time. And it was that conditioning that, forced me, or not forced me, but was one of the reasons why I was um, so like addicted to various degrees. I have 3 degrees. After college, I got my master's, was thinking about a PhD, but instead went to law school. And so I have those degrees. And even after college, continue to do a lot of other programs and trainings in meditation and in yoga. So that whole ladder of certification as a means to fulfill this sense of something is wrong with me and these external things will validate my existence.
I think it's there's aspects of what you're sharing that are unique, and there's other aspects of what you're pointing to that I think are quite universal. So I really appreciate you naming that, because I think a lot of people listening and watching are going to be like, yep, yep, oh yep. People come to me regularly feeling like they need to get another certification, another set of letters behind their name in order to give themselves permission to do the thing that they actually want to do. And sometimes those certifications are really useful. Like if you wanted to become a doctor, the certification is very important.
Great, very important.
How do you define success now? How have your definitions changed? Still focused on you, where I'm going to take you somewhere
Yeah,
else, but
I think I love this coaching side of you. You're like taking me on a journey, and I don't know where I'm going, but I'm really excited. Um, yeah, I think it's so interesting. So even after passing the bar and having all these letters after my name, it wasn't enough. Right? It was constantly seeking grants, seeking awards, and not seeking them, but of course applying for them. So there is that implicit assumption that I want to win, and ending up winning a lot of prestigious fellowships. Giving a TED talk, doing all of these things, but none of those things really fulfilled me. And I think this year, particularly because of COVID, when in March I lost pretty much all my business because a lot of my work was doing in person programming, in person trainings. So I lost about 20 programs that were already pre scheduled. It was supposed to be the most lucrative year of my career. Yeah, it took a turn. And that really forced me to look inwards around what am I doing? So the reason why I started my company, which is now called Be More with Anu, um, was because I wanted to have a social impact. I wanted to train people in science-backed, compassion-based tools to measurably break bias. And this period forced me to reflect on, well, have I really done that? I've trained over 16,000 people and counting, probably 20,000 by now, have potentially impacted over 10 million lives. Yet what has been my footprint in actually reducing racial bias that we see in our society? And that's where I was like, well, if that's what I define success as, what have I been doing? Right, I've been constantly creating courses, creating programs to please other stakeholders, to please other people, and to let them tell me what would work and what wouldn't work. So I'll give you an example. The work that I'm going to be doing moving forward is what I've always wanted to do for 6 years. I started my company in 2014. I knew this is what I wanted to do. What we need to do is train people through daily practice in actually rewiring their brains, which requires both education, so bridging the gap, misinformation, and correcting that misinformation, and then engaging in practices daily to really change those habits of thoughts. So when I first started, people were like, and I was like, well, I can do this in as short as 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And people were like, no, that's too long. We don't have time for that. You need to give me something that's 45 minutes, that's 1 hour, that's 3 hours, it's a day long. That's maximum. Maximum I'll give is like a day. So based on that, because again, I was operating in this capitalist paradigm where I have to give the market what it wants, I basically suppressed my desire around what I want to do, which was to teach and to change behavior. Instead, I followed those people, and that's great. I had a business running for 6 years, but when it comes to those metrics of success, have I really changed people's minds? Have I changed behavior around racial bias? Maybe, yes. I mean, I'm being hard on myself, so I'm sure I have, but something inside me is telling me I don't feel fully fulfilled. So I think for me now, success really is about that benchmark, that barometer of my life's purpose, what's calling my heart, which at this point is really to teach, teach more and more, teach more people, and to make all this information readily accessible and available. And then when it comes to money, it's really just having enough for me to have a life that feels nourishing. And it's interesting, the same period of COVID, one of my mentors, I went to visit her. Her wife had done this exercise. She used to be a banker at a pretty large bank, but she's just so exceptionally smart. She basically told me that, when she was around my age, she basically figured out how much money she needed to live the life that she wants. And then she earned it. And beyond that, everything is a cherry on top. And I was like, oh, wow, that's so interesting. And Jesse, I literally figured that number out for myself. And it's not ridiculous. For the entirety of my life, assuming I'll live up to, 75, 85 years old. I'm like, wow, so like, what am I chasing after? I'm like, oh, this is totally achievable to live a very comfortable life, to live. So I'm like, okay, now that I know what I want, I'm not chasing after the 50 million, hundreds of those are like so much more than I could want. So I'm like, okay, money is here, and now passion. And then now I feel like I have an opportunity to really bridge those two things together.
I love so much about this. Love the achievability, the sense of empowerment that I feel and hear in you as you talk about money, and that it's come from doing the math. It's come from just looking at the numbers and doing the gap analysis. Like, well, this is how much. I also resonate, I think, as you know, so profoundly with the frustration of reaching for something and really as a result of some kind of bureaucracy, like beating your head against a wall and feeling so undermined that like you could, because for the last 6 years, I mean, I've watched you for a third of that anyway, really devote your whole life to this mission. It's not like you weren't working at it, but when the structure is out of alignment, it doesn't function. It doesn't actually move the needle. And that's for sure what I was experiencing in New York City public schools. So I just relate so much to what you're saying. And I'm so inspired and in celebration that you have become so unapologetic about structuring your work in the way that it needs to be structured.
Yeah.
And I felt a little protective of you when you were talking about, like, it felt to me like you were a little bit chastising yourself for not holding that standard. And I want to reflect back to you that you were doing the cost benefit analysis at the time that was positioning you to get in there, and you got in there.
Exactly.
And you built this beautiful business with all these credentials, which you're now able to leverage in a really powerful way to now position you to do the work unapologetically as it needs to be done, and speak so brilliantly. One of the things I admire so much about you is that you speak about these issues that most people they don't have the language or training to talk about at all, much less to talk about with equanimity.
My favorite words.
Yes. So for those people who maybe haven't talked to you as much as I have, give us a little introduction. Like, what does the result look like when you're successful and the needle is moving? What changes in society or in individuals' lives? How do you actually see that? And I'm partly wanting to hear because of the further detail about success for you, but also because I really want people to understand what you're doing, what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah, so I think for me, the personal is so connected to the professional. And, I do want to thank you for reminding me of how the last 6 years have really brought me. So, like, nothing was lost. Nothing was, lost in vain, because it gave me the courage and the power to really figure out my path now. Like, I've been in front of senior executives at huge banks, to Amazon, to, partners at law firms, to the head of the American Medical Association. So clearly, like, I've had the eyes and ears of some of the most powerful people in our country, which has been such a gift. And it was those experiences that really showed me that, hey, this is what I'm good at, and this is what's needed. And that's what I want to dedicate my time and energy towards moving forward. So to go back to your question, so what is the vision? Like, what would success look like starting very soon, actually, the path that I'm now building? So basically, what I want to do is build a world where all of us feel a sense of belonging everywhere. So for me, the way to do that, which is, really rooted in this term equity, not equality, because we actually have legal equality, all of us, whether based on gender or race or a whole host of other things, we're legally equal. But equity is a step further where, of course, the law deems us as equal, deserving of dignity, but it also acknowledges the different histories that we've had as groups. For people of African descent, that's the history of enslavement and Jim Crow and terror and cruelty that they've experienced for 20 generations, 20 generations that have yet to be acknowledged and resolved. Similarly for Indigenous people and other people of color, as well as for people that have been assigned this dominant role in our society of whiteness. There's no such thing as white people, but it's a very recent fabrication. Yet, alongside that fabrication comes a lot of dehumanization. So, this is kind of a big picture where I want to create a world where we can see one another for who we are. And so we can all live into our full potential. Now, to do that, you know, I realized, having worked internationally, so I used to work on issues of bias in Myanmar and Malaysia and East Asia and Europe, everywhere. And these issues are very similar, whichever society we go into. And even though we have legal equality, the challenge is the people that are enforcing the laws have a lot of unconscious biases, right? These are assumptions and boxes that we put people into, and then they impact our day-to-day decision making. So what I want to do, based on, again, science-backed, compassion-based tools, a lot of which are rooted in mindfulness, is to train people in breaking bias. So we can actually create, of course, individuals, but all of these individuals have power, whether it's in their profession or their industry. So think teachers, police officers, doctors, nurses, bankers, media executives, casting directors, whole host of people that are making everyday decisions, and their decisions then impact, issues of equity. So that's kind of the goal, and the way I'm imagining doing that is really starting a community. So teaching people over 5 weeks. 5 weeks is important because not only do we need to have people train in these tools, what I call PRISM. PRISM are the 5 tools that break bias daily, but also give people the education that they haven't received. We haven't been taught about how whiteness was created, how our policies and systems and structures have really, created a society where we are like forced to be separate from one another. We're forced to dehumanize certain human beings and feel disconnected from one another. So this is about the consciousness raising portion. And then to connect them with each other in a network, what I call the beloved community, so we can then collaborate with each other to begin to make those shifts, shift the policies, the systems, the norms, the customs, the assumptions, so we can humanize one another and really live in a world that's less wasteful, more efficient, and of course, more loving. Because one of the things about bias is that it's also incredibly expensive. 2012 report done by the Kellogg Foundation found that racial bias, we're not even talking about gender bias and other forms of biases, racial bias alone costs the economy $1 trillion a year. And then also, if there was no racial bias, we would add an additional $1 trillion to our economy on an annual basis. And this makes sense from a healthcare perspective. Think about all the misdiagnoses and all the ways people have repeat visits, and all of those many micro decisions that are made by providers and other health professionals aggregate into these massive health disparities on the one hand, but the cost to our healthcare system. That same thing goes into education, criminal justice, employment, you name it. So the beautiful thing is, as scientists, a lot of us have actually done the work, but now what we need is the moral force, the moral will to be able to apply all that knowledge to ourselves and really lead by example. That's my
This
vision.
is mind-blowing to me over and over and over again. I'm like resisting the temptation to interrupt you because you just keep dropping these truth bombs that are like leave me speechless.
Well, the thing is, this is really not me. It's really kind of part of the work for me. I think connected to your work is, you basically train spiritual entrepreneurs. It's to really surrender to this greater understanding that's beyond comprehension, beyond words. That has really led me to really understand this reality. One of the frustrations that I've had, which is, from human design perspective, that is my not self, which is frustration.
Yeah.
Is that, when I see what's happening in our society, and I have seen for the last 10 years, I'm always like one of those people, like the smart guys or the smart asses, like, well, of course it's going to be this way because, I can see the big picture. But part of what I've learned in the last couple of years is to have more patience, because there's been so many people before me, so many of our ancestors of all colors that have seen the big picture and have been speaking about it. Yet we haven't picked up that consciousness. That consciousness has still remained in like very insular corners. But I think with technology now, we have an opportunity to spread this information, and to invite more and more human beings to unite with one another, to create a new reality, to move beyond hatred, to move beyond division, to move beyond separation and dehumanization towards compassion and more innovation, and to then address the myriad of challenges we as a species face right now.
I teach this tool, I guess. It's a framework, better word is framework, for conscious creation, law of attraction. And I call it the GPS metaphor. This is not like many people teach this, but I like the way I teach it. And I want to use you to highlight something, because you just illustrated it so beautifully. So GPS metaphor for anything, whether we're creating money or a relationship or a new paradigm as an entire society or globe, starts with desire, starts with the destination, starts with the vision. There's nothing to do without that. And so one of the things that I really experienced as you were talking was your devotion and clarity to this vision. And I want to celebrate that, because as an activist, it's so easy to get focused on what's not working and what's problematic. And there's so much problematic and there's so much not working that it's real easy to kind of, for me at least, to fall down that rabbit hole. But that doesn't necessarily, I think that's useful fuel for creating contrast. But if we don't come back to the vision, it doesn't really do much. So I really felt the power of that. GPS metaphor step 2 is understanding where you are, or we are currently. And that's different than the activist. I'm just shouting myself out, or throwing myself under the bus here. Like, my version of activism often in my early adulthood looked like complaining and pointing fingers and blaming. And that's not what I'm talking about. The second step is like, oh, we're in Detroit right now. It's neutral. It's not a, there's not a big charge around it. And so when I hear you speak, I think this is also one of your superpowers, that you are able to describe the current challenges that our society is facing with tremendous equanimity, neutrality, consciousness, open eyes. You're not like blinded. You're not going into the cave to hide from it, but you're also, I know, really very consciously like holding energetically a container for us to see that without getting lost in it, without making it so anathema, so wrong, so horrendous that we can't actually stay connected to the vision.
Exactly.
And GPS metaphor step 3 is just like step by step. You listen and follow directions.
Yeah.
And this is what I hear you describing when you talk about your whole 6-year evolution to this point. And of course, even before that, it's like you learn from experience and you continue to iterate, you get more data, you continue to iterate, and all of it takes you closer to this vision.
Right. And you know, like what you shared about activism and how there is a tendency, and again, this is how we've been programmed in our society to complain and, comparing ourselves to others. And I think there is a role, you know, for that. But I think the more we do it, and I invite people that do have that activist streak in them to really understand that, while complaining may feel good in the moment because it's kind of energy that we release, it's also a very subtle way that we give away our power, you know? And if we do that more and more and more, we are again channeling our internal resources and our psychic resources to give power to the institutions and the systems that are creating inequality and injustice, right? So this is where we need to really balance that. And the thing is, if something feels sad or hurtful or depressing or unfair, let's call it that, you know? So that's kind of the little shift we can make is, hey, this is unfair because this hurts because, as opposed to it's always going to be this way, or I can't believe they did that to us, then we can fall back into the dichotomies. And then because just that subtle shift can allow us to then move towards a vision. Okay, if we don't like things the way they are right now, we don't like the way police continues to treat Black people and also shoot people and kill them, mindlessly, that's awful, that's terrible, and it makes me feel angry and it makes me feel sad, and I am morally wounded by witnessing this day in and day out. That's how I feel, right? Versus then me drawing a conclusion from that, because when we're drawing a conclusion that this is how the system has always been, this is how it's always going to be, then we're again giving our psychic power away. Because what's needed now at this moment in our human history is to reimagine these institutions. There are beautiful activists out there that are doing that, around abolition, around defunding polices, reframing the police as peacekeepers, whatever it is, social work, therapy, healing. That's what we need more of. And perhaps there's a role for both of these things, but I think there is a way this takes an individual toll too. We can't forget the individual here.
I think that's I want to hear you talk more about that, because I have the sense that part of what you, and this is also true in my work, part of what you have been realizing in the last 6 months is that in order for your work to really work, in order for it to have the impact and be sustained, it has to start with individuals. Those individuals have to really do the work themselves. And it's uncomfortable and sometimes painful to do that. But that's the way forward. You can't throw the teachings at the corporation and expect them to penetrate.
Yeah.
Can you say more about what is required on that individual level? What do your clients and students contend with as they break their own bias?
I think some of the biggest things that they contend in, and we did a beta for the 5-week Breaking Racial Bias course that we'll be launching in 2021 this past summer with 34 students, a lot of whom were, professionals from various industries. And again, this is true for anyone actually in any of our cultures. It's fear, lots of shame, lots of blame and guilt, and also not knowing. So confusion, so much confusion. So almost we have kind of perfect recipe for walking on eggshells, not knowing what to do, feeling helpless, right? So, and here we have, like I had, partners at law firms or people that are making decisions in banks or nonprofits or hospitals that affect probably thousands, if not millions of lives, yet they themselves are unsure.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It really goes to that core. And for me, that was the big realization that I had about 12 years ago, after doing so much anti-racism work and going to all these trainings, that, while a lot of that work is about we have to become liberated gatekeepers, there was no framework, there were no solutions that were to be provided to these liberated gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was like, oh, well, we need to create one for them. Like, how do we hold folks responsible using data, using science, but then also using community? And I think the second important thing that's, important here around what happens to students, when they're doing this work, I think there's a tendency, because there's so much shame in this conversation, that we acknowledge that, oh yeah, the stuff is happening, it's out there. I've witnessed it, it's out there, it's not in me, which is probably true. Most of us are not out there beating Black people, right? For no reason. Um, but again, it's at the unconscious level. What are the associations that we have day in and day out with different groups of people? And how do we speak about them? Is there cynicism? Is there hatefulness? Is there a sense of separateness? And that's what we're trying to really bridge. And that requires practice, and it doesn't take that long, 6 to 8 weeks of daily practice to build a new habit. But that's where the will is required.
I don't know if this request will make sense, but I'm gonna make it.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you can guide me or coach me in a direction that might be vulnerable and or bring up some shame for me. Like, can we do a little of this work right here, right now?
Sure. So, well, we can, but I don't have any curriculum that I could bring up because, I teach and then we talk about what we've learned.
Uh-huh.
Because that's like my professorial side.
Yes.
Seeing things for how they are. But maybe like you can comment on how have you been, emotionally, not intellectually, but really emotionally around your heart, around issues of, you know, you know, the racism and the racially motivated violence that we've seen in our society. For the last 5 years, what has been that journey since, or actually 8 years since we saw the killing of Trayvon Martin? And since then, again, so many more murders that have taken place.
The first thing that, well, first of all, it's like, oh my God, there's so many layers. It's overwhelming.
Okay.
Going back that far, I'm very humbled by, and like, again, lots of feelings all at once. Of course, I'm a very feeling person, but still, like, lots of feelings all at once about my lack of attention or lack of involvement. 8 years ago, I was still working in New York City public schools. And I think that to a great extent, I was emotionally drained already, emotionally depleted already from being immersed in a racially problematic situation.
Mm-hmm.
That we knew, it was like we knew it, we were doing our best, but it was there was nothing to dismantle the fact that it was problematic in the first place.
Right.
Have a bunch of white faculty and a bunch of students of color
Right.
trying to like do something together where the power dynamic was just inevitably going to be causing problems. And I think that at that time, I had kind of made a shift around my relationship to activism. I had been cultivating my spiritual life, and I was at that time in particular, I was really leaning into like, I don't know how to solve this problem. This has got to be God's. Like, I have to give this back to God because I don't know what to do. And I need to be in my classroom. I can't go protest right now. And I think, so when you asked that question and took me back as far as Trayvon Martin, that's what came up for me was guilt, feelings of shame and inadequacy for not doing enough, not participating enough, not knowing enough. Cause I think also I was like, if I can't do anything about it, I'm not going to read the news about it. I'm not going to pay that much attention.
Right.
And I think to some extent that was still kind of operating for me until George Floyd's death, where I suddenly felt this ease, this like, I think it was actually because I felt the sense of community rise up and support me. Like I just felt carried on the river of this sense of momentum that if I participated, it wouldn't drain me. It would fuel me.
Right. Right.
And there were complicated feelings then also, of course, but it felt like I got to reunite with a part of myself that has been really important to me my whole life. Right. And really contend with what do I want to do when faced with human suffering? What do I want to do when it's right in front? It's one thing when it's across the world. What do I want to do when it's right here? What do I want to do when it's right here? And I can choose to kind of turn away or choose, like, how am I orienting around this?
No, it's such a beautiful reflection back, right? What you just shared with me, and I'll share an incident around how I got to start this work. Because I basically went to law school to do international economic development work. I had my degree prior to that in international development. I worked in Myanmar, where I started my first nonprofit. So there was no reason why I would want to stay in America and work here. But it was actually in a courtroom in New Orleans when I was observing a sentencing hearing, and I saw a defendant box full of young Black teenage boys, ages 13 to 15, were being sentenced to prison for 2, 3, 4 years at a time, one after another, because they had broken someone's cell phone or they had trespassed onto someone's property. And again, I could just see, as someone who thinks in systems and structures, the entirety of their lives being ruined in that instant. And not just their lives, their families, their communities being decimated. And I was sighing so hard as I was listening to the sentence that the officer of the peace in the courtroom had to come and say that you're disturbing the peace of the court. I'm going to have to ask you to leave, because that's how disgusted I was.
Wow.
Someone who's worked in two of the most autocratic countries in the world, Myanmar, and I guess I haven't worked in North Korea, but I've visited North Korea. The feeling that I felt in my body at that moment was worse. So like for me, doing this work was actually to feel those feelings. So when I hear from you and this is not just you, this is most of us, including me at many points, that when 8 years ago, even since then, until George Floyd's murder, when these images were basically, these are onslaught of images that come to us and we feel so helpless, so overwhelmed, so guilty, yet, what we don't do oftentimes is succumb to what that feels like, and that's the churning that's happening right now, where people are, that's what's forced a lot of people to go out and protest, because a lot of people don't know what to do other than be like, hey, stop killing Black people, right? And that is the work. And for me, the invitation is to really support that work with knowledge and then tools to really help people feel into that pain, feel into that woundedness, feel into the guilt, oftentimes misplaced, that basically prevents people from action, prevents people like you who are so talented, have so much to give the world, and have so much other, people waiting for the type of innovation that can come from you, but can't because of the way our systems have not prepared us to feel these feelings. Um, and for me to be able to do that in community with other people, we can collaborate, so we can then imagine and create new realities based on this shared knowledge.
Mm. As I'm listening to you reflect back, I'm kind of choosing, I can feel my conscious choice to just kind of lean in and let the feelings be stronger rather than quieter.
Mm.
And what came up for me was just, having spent so many years of my life, I mean, still at a deep level, just wanting so much for people to be okay, for people to not suffer, to not, to in many ways devote my life and life energy, like even to a fault, even to a codependent, self-sacrificial level, trying to make people happy, whether they wanted to be happy or not. And I think that so much of the block, at least in me, and I'm guessing this is probably pretty universal too, is like, oh, I don't know if I can handle realizing that I have actually caused harm. Like while I've been working so hard, I mean, I'm not fighting for that story, but the experience emotionally of wanting so much for people to be happy and people to be okay, and to do my part to make sure that that's happening, and then to find out that not only is it not happening, but partly it's not happening because of me, because of my unconscious bias or whatever, it feels so heartbreaking. And I can feel that part of me that's just like, I don't want to look, I don't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to. Not
You're not.
because I don't want to see, but because I don't want it to be true. I don't want that to be true. And so I mean, I think that's a great description of the subconscious in general.
Like you said, this is universal. You're not alone, and it's not personal,
Hmm.
right? The fault that a lot of us make is we say that this is personal. It's completely impersonal. It's
Hmm.
because of causes and conditions that have trained us and programmed us to behave a certain way, to humanize or dehumanize certain people, and not even be aware of it in our day-to-day decision making. And I think what you said is exact. I can hear word for word something a doctor would say, a nurse would say,
Mm.
would say.
Of course.
Even a mortgage lender would say, like, it's not that they're consciously doing. I was meeting with a friend earlier, and he was sharing with me, he's a man of color, that some of his friends, before they sold their homes, his friends of color would put pictures of white people, you know, for before they sold their property. And the appraisal value for their homes with pictures of white people were greater than if it had been their families of color. So that's how deep and unconscious this is. Um, and but the thing is, they're doing what they know, right? They're making that cost benefit analysis to work the system, but it's not personal. And this is why we need
Mm.
to not run away from it. Because the
Hmm.
opportunity is when we know that we may have caused harm, we can repair for those
Mm.
harms, right? That's a beautiful thing.
Mm.
And we can correct it, we can amend for it, we can atone for it. And that's the process of, you know, reconciliation. That's the process for true healing to actually occur at the individual level, at the interpersonal level, and of course at societal
Mm.
level.
I'm not sure. I want to put something on the table and see what your response is. Um, I had a similar kind of emotional moment of overwhelm, uh, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months ago, as the kind of election portal was like ramping up and intensifying. Basically, everyone I know is offended at a deep, like, soul level by everything that Trump does and stands for. I am in a very, um, I'm not saying that actually everyone is, but like everyone in my family, anyone that I would call, like, I don't have people in my life who understand or would vote for him. I have some people in my life who are not interested in voting for anyone and are kind of offended by the whole political process. But in general, they're also like pretty like, Trump's an asshole. You know, what a horrific schmuck of a human. And I was finding myself not really liking what that was doing to my psyche, even though I, on a personal level, like, that's how I respond, generally speaking. When I see him, when I hear him, that's generally my reaction also. I reached out to the one friend that I have that I know is an enthusiastic Trump supporter and talked with him. And what ended up coming out of that conversation was my clarity that I wanted to know if he was as concerned about Trump losing as I felt about Trump winning.
Mm-hmm.
And he was. And I was humbled and perplexed, but also reassured in some way that the vehement support and the vehement opposition are both vehement because of the shared concern. Different reasons, different people standing in the roles, but like, for my friend, who I totally love and respect, by the way, is a brilliant human, loving, compassionate, anti-racist, all these things, that he thinks that Biden will destroy the world in almost exactly, like, word for word, the way that anyone in the kind of anti-Trump camp would speak about Trump, was very, it made me feel like, okay, things are more complex than they seem. And not to give anyone a free pass, not to pretend that I don't feel the way that I feel, but to be more curious. It helped me find more curiosity and compassion and hope for our society, that I'm not alone in wanting something better for the world. I'm just different, at least from this friend,
Right.
in what I think will help. And I guess I just want to hear you speak to that. What you get from that, what your wisdom on that dynamic.
Very challenging. It's very challenging to hear that, particularly for you to phrase that this person is brilliant and loving and compassionate, when we've been living with an administration that would separate children from their families. We've been living in in an administration that would call entire continents shitholes, that would take away the right of women to have ownership over their bodies, that would remove transgender people from the military who served our country. So it's really challenging, for me to perceive that, but also I don't know this person and you do. So it's possible that this person is that way when it comes to his interpersonal relationships, when it comes to people, his family, and people he loves. But what I'm reminded of as I hear about this is, we're in a really critical historical moment right now, and it's literally the week before the election, and it's really no different from what was about 100 years ago, 90 years ago in Germany with the Weimar Republic. We're at this really tenuous moment before the Nazis had taken power. And, the people that voted the Nazis in were also incredibly loving and compassionate and careful. But the way this works is not about the individual, actually, the way politics works. It's about the narratives and the stories that politicians create and what politicians do, particularly people like Trump, who is, as the American Psychological Association would call him, a malignant narcissist, is to feed into people's childhood dynamics, of seeking a more powerful figure outside of them, because these individuals have succumbed power that they have within themselves. They don't trust themselves, they don't trust their families, but they're willing to trust a stranger with their lives because that gives them more meaning. That allows them to wake up in the morning. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we face in a divided country right now, where a lot of people have really succumbed that power. And the other thing that this really, kind of reminds me of is the book Caste that has just come out. This is the book that, I have been wanting to write myself, and I'm so grateful I don't have to anymore. Someone else has done the incredible work of putting all this research together. But the way a caste system works really is around those 8 pillars. And Nazi Germany saw a caste system of, of course, Germans, Aryans, and who they called the inferior races, of course, Jews, but also the Roma and, some Slavic people, homosexuals, and others. So I think in our country, we've had that system for about 400 years, right? And it's really deeply unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
It's very real, because as someone who has multiple degrees, who speaks multiple languages, who's very well traveled, I can really, in all measures of success, I have made it. But if I walk outside, someone can call me a terrorist or yell at me, go back to where you came from. And in that instant, they can dehumanize my existence. What allows a person to do that? Right? And that's where caste really comes in. Because I can change the way I speak, the way I dress, my education, I can do all these things, but I can't earn the benefit of the doubt, the dignity, the respect that has been allotted to only certain individuals in our society, which are people of dominant caste, the fabrication of whiteness. This is why, for the last decade, as we've witnessed so many police shootings of innocent Black people, we have yet to see a single prosecution. We have yet to see justice or accountability for any of their deaths. Whereas if those same things are done and have been done by mass shooters who happen to be white, our media, our criminal justice system gives them the benefit of the doubt, individuates for them. Like, what happened to them? How could somebody from such a loving family become a mass murderer? That type of individuation and curiosity isn't afforded to people who are of color, who are non-white. And this is basically the caste system that we're operating under. And, there are a lot of logical, rational justifications that our minds can create for supporting either candidate, but particularly Trump. But very few of those are actually rooted in the heart. I'll repeat that. It's very few of them are rooted in the heart, because they're rooted in the brain, particularly the fear-based brain. And that fear is really about that scary story of caste, even if it's subtle, about those undesirables coming in, about them taking over our country. Again, there's a separation of humanity, us versus them, that fuels that type of ideology and that type of decision making.
Thank you. I'm really glad we went there, because I think that I'm not surprised by your response, but I am aware that it feels distinct. You're putting your stake in the ground. Your open-hearted compassion is the foundation of everything that you're saying, and at the same time, to feel you from that standpoint say, and also this is not okay. Yeah. It's so not okay that it's like, how is that person really doing that? Like, I like that you're pushing even me to be a little less, I guess I want to say, like, giving the benefit of the doubt. Like, I was giving my friend the benefit of the doubt. And I feel you kind of giving me permission to be like, nah, motherfucker, wake the fuck up.
Doesn't want to wake up, that's totally okay. Like, I am not asking him to change, or do I expect him to change, but it's, I'm able to see him for who he is, not even knowing him. I know, from a psychological perspective, what's driving that decision. A lot of that is really self-preservation at the expense of others and dehumanization. So I, or someone like me or my family, is not relevant, right? And it's not personal. Like, it's not personal to me. Like, I don't, please vote for whomever you want to vote for. But I think this is how our societies become where we are. We feel separate from one another. One of my teachers has always said that, we can't live on an island of happiness in an ocean of misery. And that comes to be true. We can have our, white picket fenced, white suburbs that are have been around for 60 years, right? Since the myth of white suburbia was created. But how much anxiety is there? How much addiction, how much abuse, how much violence? How much longer are we going to stand for that in order to, again, live up to this perfectionist ideal that never was? And that's the problem.
Thank you, Anu. How can people find you?
Yes, so people can find me on Instagram at BeMoreWithAnu, or our website, BeMoreWithAnu.com. And please look out for our course launching in 2021, 5-week course around breaking racial bias. I'd love for you to participate and be on this journey with me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your mission. Thank you for your vision. Thank you for your personal work. Thank you for your service. Thank you for staying the course. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for not giving up on you.
Yay.
I love you so much. I'm so grateful.
I love you too. And thank you for this platform for me to be able to share more about my work.
What an honor. What a pleasure. Let's do more. Thank you all for tuning in. And please let us know in the comments what landed with you. What are your next action steps and how can we help? Everything you want is already here.